I'm starting this podcast with a disclaimer. In this episode of the Fat Games podcast, Gary and I talk about COVID-19 and other health issues. Gary and I are not healthcare professionals or medical researchers. The comments made in this podcast are our personal opinions and should not be considered medical advice. Please consult a medical professional if you have any questions about COVID-19, the vaccines, or any other health issue. I hope you enjoy this episode.
Hello, welcome to the Fat Games podcast. I am your host, Gary.
And I'm Blair.
And on today's episode, we're actually going to talk about why we were not at Play NYC. We're also going to reminisce about how the podcast has been going so far. And we were going to talk a little bit about the progress on our game, Kids of Karendow.
It sounds wonderful, right, Gary?
Oh, that sounds just absolutely crazy. That's just it at that part out. I don't know what I was talking there.
All right, so let's talk about Play NYC.
What is Play NYC for our viewers that don't know what that is?
So Play NYC is a relatively new indie game and AAA game expo that happens usually every summer here in New York City. It started back in, I want to say 2017. We were at the first ones with Burgle's Bounty, and then we actually haven't been back ever since. We were supposed to be back last weekend. So when this episode actually airs, it is the first weekend of August, so whenever that is. But we did not make it. And why that did not happen? Well, I had some wonderful medical issues which prevented me from taking Kids of Karendow there.
Did you get herpes?
No, Gary, you have herpes.
Yeah. Now it's a new running joke now.
The herpes joke isn't going anywhere. Going away. Your herpes joke isn't going away. So what happened was, I haven't actually mentioned on the podcast before, but excuse me, about 7 weeks ago now, I had this procedure done called balloon sinuplasty. And what that is a procedure where an ENT will basically shove a balloon up into the opening of your sinuses, up your nose, and inflate the balloon to expand the opening of your sinuses so they drain better. So people who have bad sinus conditions where they get a lot of sinus infections or have a lot of sinus pain, this is a procedure that can alleviate that. And I will say that the procedure works. I can breathe much better. I would certainly suggest that anyone who has these issues, if it's available to them, to get this procedure. However, not everyone who undergoes a procedure, it will be free of complications. And unfortunately, I had a bit of a complication. So about a week leading up to Play NYC, I started getting these nosebleeds. And they were really bad nosebleeds. Like they were the kind of gushing kind that are like gushing out of your nose. And you're like, what the fuck is going on? And then on Tuesday of the week leading up to Play NYC, it was 2 a.m. I woke up in the morning, woke up at 2 a.m. and with my nose had started bleeding, and I was like, oh God, not again. And I ran to the bathroom, and it was like gushing and gushing. It's like I couldn't stop it. It was coming so bad and so strong. Blood started coming out of my eye. And that's when I decided it was time to go to the ER. So Gerald, actually, by the time we air this, my now husband, went to the ER when I was like, oh my God, there's blood coming out of my eye. We went to the ER. Fortunately, we actually happen to live 3 blocks from a hospital. And because we told them I had the sinus procedure done recently, the most that they did was help me just stop the bleeding. So, they plugged your nose, and it basically took 3 hours for the bleeding to finally stop. And so we were in the ER for maybe 5 or 6 hours. Then we came home, and I'd contacted my doctor while I was in the ER, and he was out of town, so he referred me to one of his colleagues who could hopefully help me. So I ended up getting an appointment with him in that afternoon, and they cauterized the inside of my nose to hopefully stop the bleeding. So I had every intent still on trying to make it to Play NYC after all of that. So Gumbo, and for our regular listeners, everyone here knows that Gumbo is sort of this cooperative group of indie game developers here in New York, was hosting a sort of like a prep session for Play NYC in the evening on Wednesday. Just for everyone, make sure they had what they needed ready to present their game at an expo. It was kind of like, a dry run or dress rehearsal. So I went to that, hoping that, nothing bad would happen. So I went there, I showed the game, we in the Gumbo office. And as I was wrapping up and tearing things down, my nose started to bleed again. Not a gusher, was not nearly as bad as it had been previously. So I decided, like, you know what, I'm not going to risk this. I just need to rest, let my body heal, let everything happen, whatever caused the bleeding, let it heal again, and take a break from this and not do a lot of physical and strenuous activity. And expos can be fairly stressful and strenuous as you're setting up and taking down. You're talking to people all day and moving around potentially a lot. And I just decided that no, unfortunately, I think I need to focus on fortunately, I need to focus on my health, but unfortunately, I wasn't able to go there to promote Kids at Karendow. So long story short, really bad bloody nose, and decided to not show up for the expo because I needed to let this thing heal.
Did you need to do any follow-up appointments after that, or you were just rested that weekend?
Yeah, this past Monday, say hello to my cat, Internet. It's this past Monday, rather, I had a follow-up, and we're on the internet, so I don't want to speak ill of this doctor, but I will say I'm not particularly a fan of him. I feel like this is particularly probably much worse in the US than it is in Canada. Doctors, when something goes wrong, they get very defensive and scared that you're going to sue the hell out of them. So they try to deflect any sort of ownership or responsibility for it happening. And I kind of believe that this doctor, on the last follow-up session I had, may have contributed to the nosebleeds when he was like using the suction tool to clean the debris in my nose. He may have sucked things up that haven't quite healed yet and caused more damage than good. Now, I can't say for sure. However, I feel like that may have been what happened. Now, the doctor may have believed that at this point that everything should have healed, but maybe for whatever reason I was taking longer, and it could have been agitated by what he did. I will not say this doctor's name because, again, we're on the internet or anything like that. I'm certainly not happy with him, but I believe that because it did not start happening immediately after the procedure, it took 3 weeks before the nosebleed started happening, and it happened immediately after I was leaving the doctor's office after that third follow-up, which is why I'm kind of like, where there's smoke, there's fire, something happened. And yeah, so that's the end of the story, I think.
No, that's nasty, but also probably the reality of surgeries and stuff, I guess.
Yeah, and they advertise that this isn't really surgery because there's no like cutting or sedate or major sedation, and the results of it, like I would suggest that anyone who has sinus problems get the procedure, just maybe not with this doctor, because it's helped. It's been actually night and day versus what it was before. Despite the issue, I have no regrets about getting the procedure done.
All right, then. Guess they'll go down in the books of history. Fat Games missing Play NYC 2021 for a non-COVID related reason.
Yeah, non-COVID related.
Poof.
Poof. Yes, because we just paused and cleaned up the frame a little bit.
Yeah, I moved and I threw some garbage away.
So Gary, we started this podcast. This is episode 9, technically, part whatever we end up making it. Um, and so we are like 4 months, 5 months into this.
What? Really? It's
Yeah,
been that long?
we've been doing this for a few months now. And it's, first of all, I want to say it's amazing how many people we've been able to get to join us in this podcast when we literally have no following.
Yeah, that's pretty crazy.
As of the time we were recording this, we have 33 subscribers. So our first 2 episodes were just you and me. And then episode 3, we brought in Kung Fu Kickball, Whale Food Games. We had Jonah, the developer of that, and John Fio, the music guy. What did you think of that episode?
Actually, I think that was probably at that point our funnest episode yet. It was actually really cool to have guests. It was really cool to kind of interview people. It was actually cool to interview a musician too, for me personally. So
yeah, I enjoyed those conversations, and I am really happy to see that Jonah actually, in his arcade installations of Kung Fu Kickball, have been doing well for him. Kung Fu Kickball, again, as the time of this recording, has yet to be formally released. I believe it's certainly not on consoles yet. I don't think it's generally available on Steam yet, but it's coming along, and I'm definitely very excited for that game. The next person we had, I believe it was David Marquardt, right?
you might be asking the wrong guy here. I mean, there's a lot of people, a lot of names.
Sweden guy.
Oh yeah, that's right. Yeah, that guy. That was awesome.
So yeah, David Marquardt is currently, I'm not sure if we can say it, but he is working on a rogue light kind of shooter title. I believe, what was it? From Diamond to Dust, was that the name of it? I don't know if it's an official title.
I don't think that was it. I can't remember.
We're gonna have to
we actually have a lot of these podcasts. Holy cow!
Yeah. We're gonna have to put the name of his game down in the podcast, or sorry, down in the description after when we publish this. But I'm definitely very excited for that game because I believe he's releasing that on the Switch, and it's just kind of right up my alley. He's done a few that I really enjoy, and is arguably between him and Computer Lunch, he is probably the second most successful. And I'm just so happy for him, and I love what he does because he's got such a great artistic sense, and his games are mostly mobile games so far, but they're always very creative, and generally I've really enjoyed them. And after that, we had a different David. We had David Calabrese, aka Red Vonix.
Yes, I remember Red Vonix at GX4.
Yes, and you had to bow out of that episode because it was when you first got the herpes.
Shingles, you mean?
The shingles. So let's talk about that. So you got shingles, how long ago was it now?
I am going to say that it was about roughly a month after I got the first vaccine.
Okay.
And I'm going to frame it like that because it was probably from that.
So we need to be careful on this because people on YouTube actually get censored for talking about things around the vaccine. So I don't want to get too deep into this, but I know there has been some information that says that there's some correlation between dormant virus outbreaks after getting the vaccine. The COVID vaccine isn't the only vaccine that can potentially cause this. And again, I'm not saying the COVID vaccine.
Almost 100% speculation. So
it is 100% speculation. However, I have heard that there is correlation between this. Correlation does not imply causation. We are not saying anything bad about the COVID vaccine. Everyone who wants to get the COVID vaccine should get it. So it was about a month after the COVID vaccine, after your first dose, correct?
Yeah.
So what was it like? Now it did cause some neurological symptoms. You had pain and numbness and
Yeah, pain,
tingling.
numbness. Like it still feels like I have a spider web on my face right now.
Really?
Yeah.
How long has
It's
it been
not. It's
now?
not. It's not horrible. Like it gets maybe better every few days. It's mostly subsided, but you can still kind of tell like something's up.
But the facial scarring is actually fading even in the last few weeks that we've been doing the podcast.
Yeah. I think mm, all the scabs that it didn't pick are fading really well.
So the one immediately above your nose,
Oh yeah, that was what I was playing with a lot. Yeah.
all right, well, hopefully over more time that one fades.
Yeah, picking that one was fun.
I'm sure
Like really
it
fun.
was.
I figured,
All right.
might as well have some fun. Just pick these damn scabs.
So what we've learned from Gary is that having the chicken pox as a kid fucking sucks because it can lead to shingles later. So I'm very glad that now they vaccinate children for the chicken pox to prevent the shingles. Because as an adult, the shingles fucking sucks. And
Yeah, now I'm being told by some people that I might develop MS within the year. So, more on that later.
okay. I did not know that that was a thing that's associated with shingles.
No, I don't know. This is take it with a grain of salt, right? These are like like Facebook news things, right? So
Right. So this podcast is going to get canceled, probably off the YouTube for sure, because we're making up medical information now. But that's fine.
no, we didn't. We're allowed to talk about it.
Well, I don't know. I listen to podcasts of people who get them pulled off YouTube for talking about COVID and the vaccine stuff. So I don't really know what to expect anymore. But I feel like we need to be careful on what we say with respect to.
You know what? We can always edit stuff out after if we find.
We can, but I think it's fun to talk about this stuff too, just at a certain degree. And we are definitely already in this podcast. We've talked about like balloon sinuplasty, so we're going into medical territory here. Anyway, well, I certainly hope you don't get MS, and I certainly.
You know what? I it's a higher chance. I don't think I think I took the medication I needed to take early enough that it didn't, that didn't affect me a whole lot because I probably could have lost my vision and hearing if I just kind of let it fester. Right?
Wow, that's horrifying.
Yeah.
Okay. So going back to Red Vonix, which was the episode we did after David Marquardt. So Red Vonix has been an indie game developer for a number of years and has worked in some interesting areas, including porn games. And by the way, when I tagged porn games in that podcast, it was the second most watched podcast we had since our very first one. So
Done.
I think there might have been something to that, yeah. But he's currently working on this game called Gloam, which is this kind of adventure match 3 game, which it's not quite ready yet, but it's pretty exciting because it's a match 3 game with boss fights. I'm pretty excited for it. I think it'll be interesting. More importantly, I can't say that, but my personal favorite that I can say is Potato Tail, the game where you play as it's a Metroidvania where you play as a cat mixed with a potato. So you're kind of like this pear-shaped cat with no legs. It's pretty cute. And when we first met Red Vonix, that was the game he was showing an early build of Potato Tail, and I'm excited that he's still working on it, and he's changed a lot of elements to it because it now has turn-based JRPG combat, which is kind of reminiscent of Child of Light, which was this indie title that was published by Ubisoft, I believe, published that, but it was made by, I can't remember the company that made it, but I'm pretty confident Ubisoft in Montreal published that. But it was a side scroller kind of Metroidvania JRPG kind of combat. So I think that is kind of the closest comparison that I can make to the new Potato Tail. And I love that game. I loved Child of Light, and I'm very excited for Potato Tail as well. Hopefully it comes out before we finish Kids of Karendow, because I made a bet with him on the podcast. Nothing major. That I think it was just a few beers that he had to finish his game before we finished Kids of Karendow, or I would give him beers if he won, and he has to give us some if we win.
Well, is he pretty close to being done?
Well, no, he's focusing on Gloam right now, wrapping that up.
Oh, I see. Okay.
So I don't know which, because he's Potato Tail is in his full-time commitment right now, and I don't think it will be even after he finishes Gloam. So we'll see.
So it's a project I guess he's just kind of picking at then.
I think it's fair for me to say that. I don't know how he would respond to it, but I'll say that, yeah, I think probably. So,
are you wearing the Kids of Karendow shirt again, Blair?
Yes, I am wearing the Kids of Karendow shirt. So I will show it on camera here. So this was designed by one of the first artists we brought on board. It's a Do, and she did that awesome mural, and would actually like to ask her back to do another one, as now our new artists have finished I've almost finished all of the rest of the character art, and I would like to see something else like that, much bigger, based off of all of the principal characters for Kids of Karendow.
Oh, so you're going to add like a fuller cast?
Yeah, I want to get it all filled out with the villains and the good guys. Actually, not all the villains are done yet. There's still a few more we need to get in there, but most of the principal cast is done. And spoiler alert, some of the principal cast actually are villains. Hey!
Oh, you got to do that, eh?
Yes, we are. All right, so
said too much.
Have I? Probably not really. No. So after Red, who did we have on the podcast?
After Red, I think no, didn't we have someone before Red? Who's the guy that worked in Vidar?
Well, Dean came after Red.
Oh, he did. Okay.
So I think we actually had Dean on, but the nice thing is all the stuff is published on the internet now, so we can actually confirm that, as our brains seem to be failing us.
Oh, my brain's toast already, and it usually is by 3:30.
So actually, yes. After Red Vonix, we did have Dean, and Dean. Now, I am going to say this, and that's also because our podcast with Doug, as of this recording, has not aired yet. We've had two people on the podcast who are not from the US, who live in Sweden and Canada. And I would call them the most modest people that we've had on the podcast, because I feel like whenever we've had Americans on the podcast, they are much better at self-promotion. And
what are you trying to say there, Blair, about Americans?
I'm saying that Americans are better at talking about themselves.
Okay, that's fair. I think that's a positive. It's a positive spin.
Well, look at all American media. It's a lot of people who are very good at being focused on themselves. No, that's not like me judging them or anything. It's a cultural difference. It's a American culture that a strong focus on promoting oneself. It doesn't mean you're self-absorbed or narcissistic or anything, but it's a culture focused on making sure you know how to promote your strengths. And I feel like even from growing up in Canada and even being in the US for this long, I feel like I am far more modest than a lot of my Native American born counterparts.
Yeah, I would imagine there's an element where that well, it's probably natural just because there's a lot more people there, and it's probably naturally more competitive. So I don't think you can get away. You can afford to be as modest as buddies up north.
That is probably another part of it. Yeah. So after Rad, we did have Dean, and Dean, I think it's fair to say, is very good at self promotion. So Dean is a former attorney turned indie game developer turned indie game producer. He worked and created Vidar, or Vidar, however you want to pronounce it, which, as he promotes, is a game where everyone dies. It is a puzzle-based JRPG. No combat. Very strong on the narrative front. I really enjoyed this game. Unfortunately, I have a Mac, and the game wasn't well supported on Mac, so I was never actually able to play through it all the way. But what I was able to play through, I thoroughly enjoyed, and the story was very engaging, and it was also randomly generated. So based on who died at any given night, the story would change based on those circumstances. And that was I still think to this day that game was really good, and I would love to see Dean go back and revisit that. He's jokingly said that he wants the Kids of Karendow engine to do a revisioning of Vidar. And then he worked on this title called Waste Knots, which he in the podcast said that failed to get sort of funding and sort of publisher interest because it, using his words, Gary, and you were on that podcast, it was boring. That's what he said. Which is, for any kind of indie game developer to have that kind of feedback and not feel like you can fix it and make it better, it's kind of devastating.
I know, like I always wonder what other people think about our game. Like I'll show it to friends, they like it. Some of them, I can tell they genuinely like it, but I don't know what everybody else thinks. Especially the ones that set the controller down after a few minutes.
Those ones don't enjoy it. The game was not for them when they set the control down.
Yeah.
If they play all the way through it, they're hooked.
Yeah, I think that's the indicator, is if they want to play all the way through the demo.
And that is kind of a disadvantage of us not being able to be at Play NYCs. I was not able to observe the way players interacted with the game, because that gives you so much good information on what works and what doesn't. However, we are going to be at one of the greatest expos for that, and I think in human history, MegFest, in January. It's going to be in person again. Very excited. And the quality of people who hang out in the MIVS hall there, MIVS being, I believe, MegFest Indie Video Game Showcase. They're extremely friendly people who are there to help you and give positive, or just give constructive feedback, not always positive, but constructive feedback on the games you're showing there. So I'm very excited to go there and show the game. And I think after over 3.5 years in development, almost close to 4 years at that point, we're going to have a really, pardon my language, but fucking solid product to show.
You know what? This takes me back to when we went to MegFest, 2018. We actually had a chance to show that game for an hour or two, I believe. Now, I think it was really tough to get people to walk by our booth and play the game, but the ones that did, they seemed to really enjoy it.
Wasn't even a booth, Gary.
Yeah, it wasn't even a real booth.
The table with my MacBook set up on it, where we had the game showing.
And you got the borrowed controller from, buddies of yours.
Yep. We got a lot of positive feedback. I think the game is light years ahead of where it was back then. But there are things that I still think we can improve upon with respect to the user experience, with respect to the UI. That's gone through a few changes, and we'll go through a few more changes before we get to MagFest. And we'll talk about that when we actually get to some of the gameplay footage we're going to show later on the podcast here.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to the crab cakes.
Me too.
Those are usually good in here.
I'm looking forward to the wine bar again. So going back to Dean, he is now a producer at a small studio here in New York. And he gave us a lot of interesting feedback on how to promote Kids of Karendow, and basically to lean into some of the game's toilet humor. Because we actually, as we've said a few times in the podcast, that we kind of started this podcast to help promote the game, but all we have done is create another product that we also then need to promote. So our viewership in the podcast hasn't been great because we haven't been promoting it or the game. So it's kind of a catch-22 here. But hopefully we are able to dedicate more time to sort of solve both of those problems, because that's really what it needs, is dedication from us. So we have 2 more guests we've had on the podcast so far. By the time this airs, both of them should have premiered, unless we decide to premiere this stuff out of order and kind of give Doug the shaft and have him air later. We've had
he's going to be very upset that we
I doubt it, but we have Andrew Garahan from Computer Lunch, who has created the wildly successful game Cell to Singularity. Him and his team have produced what I would call I think it's safe for me to say that it's not something that I would play on a regular basis, but it is a game that I can totally understand where the audience comes from and the appeal from it, because it is very educational, very engaging. It's very science driven, and it's all about evolution, and not just evolution necessarily, because there is some speculation that happens as humanity proceeds to the stars on top of that. So it's based in science fact for a long, and science fiction, but science fiction based on our understanding of science today as they go to Mars and other planets. And I think it's got on Android alone 10 million downloads, so it's clearly a popular game. And we had an hour with him, and was really enjoyable. And
I like that one. I was late to that one as well, so I had to kind of chime in. I think you guys were already 30 minutes into the interview.
Yeah, it was a great conversation, because we talked a lot about why we make games. It wasn't just about Cell to Singularities. Well, I've known Andrew for 5 or 6 years now, and it's always nice to kind of talk to someone. He's a real creative individual and a really smart guy. And he's done a lot of work as well with his wife on his games. And that's always interesting to sort of have that husband-wife combo, because he wasn't the first one, because Dean and his husband did some work on Vidar together, and that's probably the best example. But David Marquardt and his wife did a lot of the work together on their games as well.
Yeah,
so
we interviewed a lot of kind of
people who did work with their partners.
Yeah, developers, yeah.
And I know others, and I've been on the podcast. They haven't committed to it yet. I'm hoping I can kind of convince them, because it'd be awesome to have them on. But we'll see if we can get there. And the last guy is our Gary and I's personal friend, Doug Demian. The only AAA guy we've had on the podcast so far. I think we will do more, because I think there's a few more people I'd like to ask on who have done work for the AAA industry that would have a lot of interesting things to say. Doug works for BioWare, worked in the Mass Effect series. There were certain things he couldn't tell us that we can't share now, because um, to respect his own NDA, or the NDA he has with BioWare. But he did some work on the facial, how do you the facial movements of characters when they speak, which is, you don't really think much of that as an indie game developer, but when you're looking at a AAA title and you have to pay that much attention to detail, that's pretty crazy. So he says it's a lot of fun, and he loves every day of his job. So that's
good. It sounds like he's
awesome.
in a good work environment.
Absolutely. All right, Gary. What else do you want to chat about?
So we have a couple more podcasts lined up, right? I remember.
So right. So our next one is with Cheap Ramen Games. We are going to talk to John and Vinit about their relatively recent release, Meow Pow. We are recording that podcast towards the end of the month here. I'm really excited for that because Meow Pow is actually an incredibly fun game. It's kind of like I think I'd describe it like kind of an air hockey kind of game, multiplayer air hockey. It's on Steam. It's free actually, so everyone should check it out. And I don't know how much they're going to share about their new title. I don't know how much they're ready to share. They'll let us know when we do that. And then we're actually taking a bit of a pivot. We're doing our first ever tabletop game. We're going to talk to Kinsole Studios, all 5 of them. That'll be an interesting podcast.
Yeah.
I never interviewed 5 people at a time before. And we're going to talk about they've got Alchemia and Steep Sears, and I'm not sure if they're working on another one now, but that's something we'll talk about. And they've been doing this tabletop stuff for, oh god, I met them back in 2015, so it's been over 6 years.
Have you played any of those games?
Yes, I own them both. I supported both their Kickstarters.
Oh, right on.
So it'll be pretty exciting to have them on too. It'll be a lively chat. I guarantee you that.
Oh yeah, 5 people. It's going to be rowdy in there.
Definitely.
What are your thoughts on tabletop, Blair? Have you ever considered doing a tabletop game?
In my younger years, yes. Now I feel like the electronic route is easier in some respects. There's no physical medium you need to worry about printing, selling, distributing. The distribution just becomes a whole other level.
Yeah, logistics is hard.
Oh yeah, definitely.